Geek. Talking baseball every week. Cause they're Gleeman and the Geek.
And welcome to Gleeman and the Geek, post-meltdown edition.
We lived.
We made it through. We made it through the...
Who are you?
I'm John Bones from Trinity Leading. I'm with me, Aaron Gleeman of theathletic.com.
We're changed men, certainly, from the experience. Have you? There's like that picture on Twitter of a guy.
We're changed. Just imagine how Royce is.
There's a picture of a guy. I keep seeing it on Twitter. It's like a meme where it's like, here's an 18-year-old guy going off to war, like World War I or II. I don't even know. And here he was 18 months later. And he looks like he's his own grandfather, basically. That's what we are after the meltdown. But yeah, Royce got a haircut for it. Made fun of him for that.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, the meltdown was Saturday night. It's Friday as we're recording this. Friday
Are we sure you didn't get the haircut for the Diamond Awards award he got?
Maybe. No, okay, yeah. He didn't say that when I said, you got a haircut for this? Yeah. A couple people in attendance said I've been hearing your impression of Royce over the years. It was pretty accurate.
Okay, good.
Especially when we got to talking about Sunel. This guy sucks. But yes, thank you to Patrick Royce of the Star Trib and I guess Score North. I don't know if he's the official employee there. And thank you to Glenn Perkins of BSN.
He said Hubbard. Is what he said.
Yeah, Hubbard, right, whatever it is.
the actual background.
Thank you to them. I thought we were, they were booked for, we pitched them or you pitched them on. Show up, half-hour interview, maybe shake some hands, kiss some babies, and you're out of there. They both did like almost 45 minutes an hour
at least,
with us and could have gone longer, obviously. I thought both the interviews were great. And to the shock of everyone, us included, us more so than anyone, it actually recorded properly at the poorhouse, so props to them. And
Nate did a great job. We're doing the recording.
Yes, if you haven't listened, it was the last free episode. Hopefully you've listened to that.
Yep.
Nice long one. We didn't even really have to do an intro or anything. We just let it kind of roll, speak for itself. Sold out.
320 tickets.
It went well.
Yeah, and it wasn't nearly as overly packed as I was afraid it was going to be. It ended up being, comfortable, I guess. A lot of people got seats and people got food and people got free beer from 612.
I'll see everyone 360 days from now at the next one. That's the next time I'm going to leave my house. John's got big plans, though. John's got big live event plans.
I think so. We're going to try and do something.
John has become untethered from Aaron in this regard. And so he is free to fly as high as he would like.
Right.
Not weighed down by the anchor of Aaron Gleeman. Social anxiety and general dislike of the human race. So John, limitless really potential for John. But yeah, just thank you to everyone. It was fun. Obviously, the caliber of guests that we're able to get now is pretty great compared to the first few years. Although we were happy with certainly the guests then, but we're at the top here of who we want. Like you can pick who you want, and I thought Royce was great. We knew he'd be great. He was on the podcast last year, and he was great. Glenn Perkins, we did a podcast with 5 years ago or whatever, and he was fantastic, and we knew he'd be great. I also just thought it was very fun that all the other beat reporters showed up.
Right. Yep.
Both Stribbers and MLB.com and Pioneer Press, and Dan Hayes was there, which was...
I felt bummed because I got almost no time to talk to them.
I literally didn't talk to Dan Hayes, my partner. I didn't see him. He texted me the next morning.
I ended up talking to him later after the event.
You guys went to your meeting spot, which is called the Loon.
That's right, yeah.
Which I didn't go to, but because I'm a party pooper. But I thought, compared to where we were 10 years ago or X number of years ago, the idea that of course, all the beat writers show up. And also, beat writers from other sports showed up.
Right. Yeah, right.
R.T. Ryback, the former mayor of St. Paul, I guess.
Minneapolis,
yeah. Why did I think St. Paul?
I don't know.
He was there with his son Charlie, who I've been wanting to meet for a long time, and they were great.
Yeah, they were.
Couldn't have been nicer. And just like
Dana Wessel.
Wow, him I see all the time. Dale Wessel. That was the big draw.
Right, yeah.
Dale Wessel. Every year he tells me how much he likes the event. He got some FaceTime with Royce. He already knows Glenn Perkins. It was great for the Wessel clan, which I'm happy about.
I get to see David Brower. I don't get to see very often.
David Brower, I walked in
for a little bit.
Yeah, Aaron Rupar, I haven't seen. David Brower, I guess I haven't seen in 3-4 years since COVID. Mm-hmm. I used to see him quite a bit. I love David Brower. Great guy. I walk in, and I make my way over to their little corner to say hi to him. And he walks up to me, and he takes his hand, and he puts his hand directly on my bald spot, and he says, "When did that happen?" That's literally the first thing he said to me. And I thought, wow, okay. And I said, well, I haven't seen you.
You know, you're picking up exactly where you left off 3 years ago. If you thought there were going to be any awkwardness, the awkwardness has been gone.
Yeah. I said to him, "Can you keep your hand there for the rest of the night? That would be helpful. Or I need to wear a yarmulke." Yeah, I've been debating becoming religious for the first time in my life just because the placement of the yarmulke.
So they've got a spray on. You can do something like that.
I should do that, honestly. So yeah, thank you to everyone who came out to the Meltdown. It was a lot of fun. Even I'm not a person who enjoys fun, but it was a lot of fun. Yep. And I was happy that the podcast that came out of it was nice and long and listenable and good.
Frankly, we're always just humbled that many people want to get together, especially on like one of the coldest nights of the year. To come out and join us and hang out and talk Twins. It's fantastic.
Yes, especially after a almost 3 year absence, right?
Yeah. And keep an eye out for opening day, because I think it will not be the coldest night of the year. Hopefully on that day, and we'll try and do some other event around that.
Yeah. So. Okay. So. A couple other things before we get into some Twins news and notes, obviously. Less than 2 weeks now until the start of spring training. In fact, how many days? What day is today? Today is February 3rd, which means 11 days from now, people will be, it'll start. Like the report date. The pitchers and catchers are on the 14th or the 15th.
I think.
Yeah, so you'll be there then.
I'll be there on the 14th.
I'll be there the 19th.
Yep.
Before the first full squad workout is the 20th. We'll be doing shows from there.
Yep.
Yeah, we would very much like it, and I think you would like it too, more importantly. If everyone would sign up for the Patreon as we kind of ramp up towards spring training. Like I said, it's 11 days away. John will be down there. I'll be down there. Maybe we'll get some guests involved.
Right.
At the very least, we'll be doing shows literally from the ballpark, as you can kind of hear the crack of the bat and the sounds of a season starting up. So yeah, Patreon, Patreon, patreon.com/Gleeman. New episodes are $1. They're commercial free. We do mailbags, we do interviews, we do midweek shows. We're going to do a whole bunch of shows live from spring training while we're both there. We would very much love it. If you would sign up, it would mean a lot to us, and I think you'll like it.
It's okay to get excited about this. You know, it's one of the things I kind of wanted to bring up as
don't get excited about
anything, a side tangent.
That's my general.
As a side tangent, I think you and I both sense. I'm wondering how you, when you take a look at the metrics and such that you get from the Athletic, that there's a lot more excitement about the 2023 team than there has been. I feel like that there's a lot of genuine excitement about the 2023 team that I think you and I can kind of take a look at, whether it's a Patreon signups or downloads of the podcast or metrics on Twins Daily. Twins Daily just had its biggest month ever in January, which is weird.
This podcast just had its third biggest month ever. Right. And by far the biggest off-season month ever.
And I think we tend to be leading indicators on that. Like I don't know that that's going to show up in season ticket sales or attendance or whatever right away. But I think there is a level of interest. You know, there's still going to be you got to prove it. You know, you got to show me what you that it actually works. But I feel like there's a level of interest and excitement around this team that I haven't seen since 2019.
I agree.
2020.
A couple things on that. When you make big moves in an offseason, people get excited.
Right.
Whether or not those moves work out well 10 years down the road or whatever, when you spend $200 million on a great player, which you've literally never done before and may never do again, who knows, people are like, oh, wow. But to your point, and I tweeted about this.
Let me give you a B on top of that, too. Yeah. Especially when that also suggests, listen, we're going to be competitive for 3, 4, 5 years now.
Sure.
This is not we're going to build up. We got a 2 or 3 year window. We got to get in there, et cetera. Now, that might still be the case. Don't get me wrong. They might still, but it does show that we don't have to worry, like you said, like we've said in the past, we don't have to worry about a rebuild. We don't have to worry. Like, we've got some cornerstones here.
I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell you this is a great team. I think it's going to project out as we start to see over the next few weeks, some projections and betting lines, which I saw a few already out there. We'll definitely talk about those as they come out from more prominent places. But I'm not going to sit here and tell you this is a great team. I mean, this is going to end up being projection-wise, kind of a neck and neck in the AL Central.
Sure.
I'm guessing maybe a game or two behind Cleveland.
Mid to high 80s. Yeah.
Right. And so, yeah, from an excitement level, it's not that people think they've built some sort of super team, or even that the outcomes of the past 2 years, which have not been good, are like out of the realm of possibility for this year. But I do think that there's this sense on Twitter, certainly, and on comments of articles, and even when we open up the mailbag on the Patreon side, there's just, like, every article I write, there's comments that are like, I'm sick of this team. I'm never giving them another dime. I'm not going to the ballpark. And we actually talked about that with Royce because I was curious what his thoughts are. And he basically said, these people haven't been coming to the ballpark for 40 years.
Right,
like,
exactly.
What are you talking about?
Right.
And it's not that the idea of being frustrated by this team is out of bounds or anything. I mean, there's reason to be frustrated. They haven't won a playoff game in a billion years, and they're coming off losing seasons. And certainly their decision-making has not been flawless by any means. I mean, this whole podcast is about that. But what I will say is I think it's clearer than ever because of what you mentioned, kind of the stuff we can see for the content we're putting out or the live events we just did or whatever. This notion of the fan base being, so low on morale and the fan base being sick of it and all this stuff. I don't think that's the case. Now, in terms of, like you said, season tickets or attendance or whatever, I mean, there's certainly it's a different barrier for entry, spending $100 to take you and your family to a game versus tuning into a podcast or going to Twins Daily or reading even The Athletic or whatever. But what I'll say is, it's not just that our numbers and our traffic and our downloads and our subscriber base and whatever you want to point to are higher. It's that they're like almost exponentially higher. Right. Yeah, they've gone up significantly, even compared to like 2019 when they were really rolling, and certainly compared to last year at this time and all that stuff. But it's not. I think it's a good, and I actually think the meltdown itself is very good for this, like, to see people in person, to see how enthusiastic people are, not about the Twins are going to go win the World Series, but just, hey, baseball season's coming. Let's talk some baseball in the middle of January. It's good to see people in person, even if they're the same people on Twitter. The vibe is completely different. And so I think it's good to kind of separate out the experience of being a Twins content producer, which we are, online, and the negativity involved in that, and the constant stream of, 0-18. Sure. I'll never give this team another dime. Yeah. Why would
there's a loud segment that is very loud on online.
And I'm not even saying that's not righteous in some regard. Like, but what I'm saying is, don't let one person like that change your opinion of what the actual sense of this team is or baseball itself in Minnesota is, when we can point to this and say, well, I mean, my God, my articles are up 50% compared to 2 years ago. Yeah. Twins Daily breaks a new record every month. Our podcast numbers for the free show are shattering old records, and for the Patreon show, which people have to pay for, it's $1 an episode, but there is a barrier for entry to that. And
it's not an insignificant barrier for people who've never really heard of podcasts.
But I mean, that's up, 40% compared to like a year or 18 months ago or whatever. And so I do think, whether this fan base in general is very frustrated, somewhat frustrated, however it is on that scale, it is undeniable at this point, at least from our perspective. Mm-hmm. Maybe the Twins feel differently. Maybe the television numbers are different, all that stuff. I mean, those have their own issues, which we're going to actually probably talk about in a minute, the Bally stuff, but or Sinclair stuff.
Right, yeah.
But from our point of view, here's the thing. I write like 3 articles a week about the Minnesota Twins. You and I put out like 2 or 3 audio shows about the Minnesota Twins a week, and you run the biggest Twin, whether it's, blog, forum, whatever you guys want to call it, in the world. The numbers are off the charts for all of them. So if this fan base is...
And it feels like that is the top of the sales funnel. You know what I mean? Like that is sort of at the very least, I'm interested enough to go check out what did the Twins just do? And I'm going to come back tomorrow to say, what does it mean? Et
Right.
cetera. I mean, like that is the very top of the sales funnel in terms
whether
of
or not that
Thank you.
converts to someone calling up the Twins ticket line
Yeah.
and saying,
That's on
give
them.
me 60 times 2
Yeah,
for,
right.
whatever in whatever section. Well, yeah, I can't. I mean, I have not. Although
Right.
we did talk to St. Peter. There was a media luncheon, whatever day, Thursday,
Yeah,
Friday morning. At Target Field. And St. Peter said, so last year they had like 1.8 million was the attendance, 1.8 million and change, which was the lowest, not only for a normal season at Target Field, but it was the lowest anywhere since like 2003 or something like that, even going back to the Metrodome. And he said, we're going to beat that number. He was certain of that.
Yep.
And B, he expects them to top 2 million by the end of the season, which is not in and of itself amazing.
Right.
But if you look, 2 million had become sort of standard in the 2014 to 2018 range, 2 million, 2.1 million, something like that. I'm not saying that's a great number,
No.
but that's at least back to
and that was when they sucked, by the way.
Well, right.
right.
But they've been sucking for 2
Right,
years.
right.
And I saw a bunch of people, because I tweeted his quote about that or whatever, and a bunch of people were like, well, yeah, he's just being optimistic. He wants people to think. And I said, well, yeah, I'm not saying he's not being optimistic. But we've talked about this before with St. Peter on the show when he used to come on the show. The majority of baseball tickets are sold before a pitch is thrown.
Right.
For the season.
And it's a huge majority. It's
Yes,
like
the vast
I've heard from
majority.
the inside folks there, 85%.
Right. And
Right,
I know
right.
people think, well, for them to hit the 2 million, they're going to have to be in contention down the stretch. And it's like, maybe. But what
right.
all he's saying when he says that on January 30th or whatever is we project based on where we're at now. And like you said, I mean, minimally 70%, 75% of their tickets towards that have already been sold, whether through season tickets or individual game tickets, and they're also still putting stuff out. So I'm not here to tell you 2 million tickets is amazing or anything,
Right.
but I do think that kind of jibes with what we're saying, which is this is not a fan base that's thrilled with this team or its management or whatever. Certainly not its television situation. Nor should the fan base be thrilled.
Right.
But if you think, as I've seen some media members suggest, that like the interest in baseball in Minnesota has disappeared or even really dissipated, I reject that premise.
Yeah,
And here's the thing: if it's true overall, but it's very much not true for you
Right.
and I and the places we're associated with,
Right.
well, who cares? Do you know what I mean?
Right,
like
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
we're last month we averaged 17,000 downloads per new episode. We put out 4 shows and we got 70,000 downloads, roughly, something like that.
It's nuts.
Well, if people don't care about the Twins, what are they tuning in for? This charming banter between the two supermodels here? Like what? I mean, come on. Okay, so the other thing I just wanted to say, a couple people at the Meltdown said to me, because we've discussed this, I think more on the Patreon, you're an idiot, they said to me, which a lot of people come to me and start sentences.
I
with
thought
that.
you were talking to me.
Well, you didn't. We didn't really talk too much at the Meltdown. They said you're an idiot because I'm the one kind of stopping merchandise for the show for some weird.
You're not the one stopping merchandise. I'm the one stopping
Well, when we've discussed it, I'm like, But I think this might be the year for it. I think finally I've cracked. Not even from I mean, we're not going to get rich off selling T-shirts or
Right.
anything, but like, you make $1 a shirt or something like that. But I've heard from enough people who have called me stupid with my stance on this, that people we're actually keeping people. I view it from the standpoint of I don't want to put out a product so people think we're trying to like squeeze dollars out of them.
Right.
We've been very careful, I think, about that.
Right. I think so.
But what I haven't realized until recently, when people have just said to me, "You're a moron for not saying it like this," is that if people want to pay $18 for a T-shirt
Right.
and they want a T-shirt or a hat or whatever it is, they don't view it that way. So yeah, I think this is going to be the year we finally do it, and we're lucky in that we have a longtime sponsor,
Yes.
Soda Stick.
Which sounds we should maybe mention this
Well,
sponsor.
this is going to sound like this whole thing was an ad, which it wasn't. But John actually pressed pause in the middle of my little rant there and said, well, actually, we have a Soda Stick. See, I think, assuming Soda Stick is still interested. Hi, Soda Stick. They've produced all kinds of great shirts that you see players and coaches and fans wearing at Target Field all the time.
Right.
So maybe here's my closed circuit to Soda Stick. Send us some design ideas. And in the meantime, if you're out there listening and you say, what's Soda Stick? Well, Soda Stick is the place that we're going to trust to make our shirts,
right?
Probably.
SOTA.
Yeah, like Minnesota. SodaStickCo.com or just Google Soda Stick.
And they've got a brand new shirt coming out because they can jump on stuff like this. They've got the Cub Cobblers Texas shirt.
Which here's the thing. I'm not going to explain that. If you know what it is, then you're interested in the shirt. If you don't know what it is, you're not going to be interested in the shirt.
But do a search on Cub Cobblers Texas TikTok.
But that's how Soda Stick works. Basically, they're able to do small batch production of Twin stuff or other Minnesota sports stuff, kind of in the moment, memeable. Type of thing.
That's right.
Kind of some inside jokes, some great like kind of past moments. And the thing I always say about Soda Stick is go to SodaStickCo.com or Google Soda Stick, whatever. Look around for 3 minutes. I defy you to not want something you see on the website.
Yes.
I've been the same way. Like I've bought for people for birthdays and Christmas and stuff. I just go there and I'm like, I know there's going to be something that a Minnesota sports fan will want. And if you use the promo code Gleeman on Soda Stick, you can get 15% off whatever the order is.
That's correct.
So, yeah, hopefully, I don't know, months from now. Probably not weeks from now. Because it'll take me longer than that to decide between any design ideas.
Sure, yes.
But months from now, hopefully there will be a Gleeman and the Geek shirt that you can get on Soda Stick, perhaps by using the code Gleeman and get 15%
that's
off.
right.
That'll be really
so
meta.
get out there right now and grab something for the Twin Season, and we'll see if we can find you some of those. We also
our other sponsor that we want to talk about
local sponsor,
is 7th Avenue Pizza,
right.
Which I have been at KFAN several times when they have just cooked up a fresh 7th Avenue breakfast pizza. Because I'm often there at like 9 a.m. or whatever. So after the morning show.
How good are those?
The breakfast pizza, I'd never gotten like from Lund's or anything.
Right.
I've gotten 7th Street.
Right.
Or 7th Ave.
Yeah.
But not, I usually get pepperoni, sausage, whatever. The breakfast pizzas are real good.
We had them at the tailgate a couple of weeks ago. Or no, a couple of months ago probably at this point.
Go for tailgate.
Absolutely fantastic. We're going to pick up a couple today from Lund's and Byerly's. They're only, I think, $8 a piece at Lund's and Byerly's this week right now.
Yeah.
And we're doing that because we've got some guests coming over on Sunday, and we're going to do some heavy apps, and we're going to grill.
John has friends.
We're going to grill the pizza out on the patio or on the deck.
So yeah, 7th Avenue Pizza, great pizza. I get it. They have only recently become a sponsor,
yes.
And I have eaten dozens of 7th Avenue pizzas in my life. Let me just say that. It's available. Lund's and Byerly's is where I get it, but Kowalski's and Coburn's and Hy-Vee and Holiday.
Coburn's and Cashwise, in fact, right now have a 4 for $24 deal. So you can get them for as low as $6 a piece, which is
They
great
also
price,
support a lot of local charities, which I think is great. They do school fundraisers, and I don't know, just a great
sauce's
pizza.
face on the packaging sometimes.
It's a mark against them, certainly. But, that's what I'm eating, I guess, in the morning a lot of the times. But, yeah, 7th Avenue Pizza. Go pick it up. Go get it at Lund's, $7.99. Okay, so we got a lot of Twins notes that we'll get into. I think, I also wanted to say, and this is proven by the last 10 minutes, I do like that. Like Royce sat down for the interview, and I had like an intro planned for him. Like, ladies and gentlemen, this is the award winner, blah blah blah, Patrick Royce Hughes, blah blah. And he just started talking. He's like, "Hey guys, so anyway, you were saying earlier."
Well, you weren't there for the Diamond Awards, but basically his acceptance speech was exactly the same way. There was no There was nothing written down. There was no plan. It was just like, well, let's talk a little bit. I'd like to.
And then Perkins essentially did the same thing, where he just sat down and we just basically picked up our conversation from when we talked to him last. And I thought that is such a perfect fit in my mind for the vibe of this show, which is literally just I come to John's house and sit down, and John goes, "You ready?" And I go, "Yep," and that's the show. And it can produce negative aspects. Maybe it's not as coordinated,
maybe not as structured, as polished,
whatever. But I just love that we're doing the live event, it's recorded, and it's a show. And in my head, I'm like, I got to intro these guys, 3-time All-Star going. And no, he just sat down. He's like, anyway, you guys were talking about, and it's like, all right, perfect. So I like that. So I just wanted to say that too. Okay, so since last we spoke, because it's now been 2 weeks since we did a regular
there is some
show,
actual news.
They have traded for Michael A. Taylor, the Royals center fielder the past couple of years. We talked a lot about this on the Patreon side. So if you want like 40 minutes on Michael Taylor and what it means, but to just go over some of the basics with him. 32 years old. Like I said, he's been the Royals' primary center fielder the past couple of years. Before that, he was with Washington. He's been a starting or
kind of a fringe starter,
for the past decade, basically.
Yep.
Super fast, even at 32. 90-something percentile sprint speed. Great arm, just like a cannon for an arm. Which we can talk a minute about how good the arms are in the Twins outfield, just in general with him. And Gold Glover in 2021, certainly, I think he led all of baseball in defensive run saves and outs above average last year. He didn't win the Gold Glove. But, I mean, this is just an elite center fielder who can also play left and right. But just a true, I would say, certainly top 5 for the past 5 years center fielder. And we've talked a lot over the years that because of Buxton's injuries – one of the things I think at least, the Twins have failed to do as well as they should have is put in place a quality backup center fielder. Because at this point, even if things go well, you're going to need someone else to start 50 games in center field. And too often, it's been Jake Cave or 2 years ago, a very clearly rushed and fish out of water Gilberto Celestino, let alone, Mark Contreras, or they threw Nick Gordon out there with no outfield experience, or Rob Refsnyder. I mean, not all of them have been bad necessarily, but and sometimes it's, well, we're on the 5th guy on the depth chart. What did you expect? But I would argue that in general, since Buxton kind of proved to be injury prone and likely to miss significant games, which has been the case for 6 or 7 years, they just haven't had in place a backup that you would go, all right, that's a high-end backup. And by high-end backup, what I mean is basically a low-end starter.
Right.
And so it does remind me a little bit.
So it can be kind of hard to find that guy, right? Because that guy's looking for a starting job,
for whom Michael Taylor could start and has started for the Royals. Perfect example. Not a great team, but he's done a pretty decent job there. And so they traded a couple of marginal reliever prospects, Steven Cruz and Evan Sisk, to the Royals. They pick up Taylor at a $4.5 million salary, which is roughly the going rate for a good backup. They did the same thing kind of with Kyle Farmer, who's now the backup shortstop. Yeah. Again, low-end starting shortstop, premium backup infielder. And for that matter, they kind of have that situation at catcher. Ryan Jeffers as an everyday catcher is kind of stretched. Right. Ryan Jeffers as your backup catcher is among the best in the league, probably. Yep. And so... And
they've really worked on their bench. It was one of the things.
The depth, was clearly a priority, as it should have been after 1,000 injuries last year.
We started talking at the beginning of the season, sort of like, one of the things that's going on is they have a blank canvas, right? They've got a lot of money, and they don't have that much that they need to really get. They got to get the shortstop.
They weren't that many gaping holes where they were like, we have to fill this.
And not only did they fill the holes with very good players, like they got the Carlos Correa for shortstop, and then went out and got the second best catcher on the market for the second one, right? Yeah. As a result, they also went out and what did they do with the leftover money? They went and worked on. They traded for a pitcher, Pablo Lopez, right? Traded for a starting pitcher.
Starter in a 5-man rotation.
But then they also went and took care of a number of the bench spots.
Right. Farmer, Taylor. Right. Nick Gordon is right now on the bench as your last bench guy, which is, we saw Nick Gordon was certainly a regular caliber player last year.
He had 400 at-bats last year.
Right. So, I think that's the big takeaway from Taylor. But, Taylor himself, first of all, Dan Hayes reported like 2 weeks ago or a week before they pulled off the trade that the Twins had talked to the Royals about Taylor, and the Royals basically said, this is according to Dan's report, which is, we've talked about how good Dan has been this offseason on reporting stuff, but basically they said, well, yeah, we're willing to trade Taylor. We would like Josh Winder back for him. And the Twins said, of course, please. You got to be S-ing me with that.
Right.
And then they checked back later, and the price had dropped to, I'm not going to say Evan Sisk and Steven Cruz are incapable of being decent major league relievers. I actually think both of them profile as decent relievers. Sure. Cruz, especially if he starts to throw some strikes, has the size and the stuff to be a setup caliber guy. But they're, C grade relief prospects. Every organization has 10 of those guys. Right. So that a couple of those guys ended up being the price, I think is a reasonable price. I think it's interesting, especially in the wake of similar negotiations with the Marlins for Arise and Lopez, where the Marlins were like, let's do a 1-for-1, and the Twins said, hell no. And then a week later, they got the Marlins' fourth best prospect, a top 100 borderline guy in Jose Salas. I think you would have to say the Twins kind of played that out via their patience, which has been for better or worse, certainly
a value,
a calling card
right.
of this.
That's exactly right.
Front office over the years. So they pick up Taylor. I think
the person that probably affects most is Celestino.
Yeah, I think you can expect Celestino, again, barring spring training injuries,
right,
to begin the season in AAA at St. Paul, which is a good thing. I mean, he was rushed to the majors in 2021 because of injuries to the outfield, and he had barely played above single A at that point. He had played none at AAA. He had barely even played at AA, and they just kind of threw him in, and he was completely, overmatched. And then last year, because of what we talked about, they hadn't established a good hierarchy for a backup center fielder. They just kind of threw him in again, and he was actually pretty good in April and parts of May, and then
they figured out that they
turned back into a pumpkin a little bit.
Because he's not pulling the ball.
He's played parts of 2 seasons, in the majors. He's still 23 for another couple of weeks, and so you look, and he's played 75 total games in the high minors,
exactly
AA or
right.
AAA. Yeah. So I think sending
I didn't think he had that many at AAA to beat.
Well, what happened was
he got hurt.
In 2021, they sent him back to AAA after a while.
Okay.
And then he got like 40 games at AAA or whatever. But he's performed well in the minors. I also just think when you rush a player like him at 21 or even 22 into the majors like that, when they're clearly not ready, they're not polished, they haven't even demonstrated that they're a high-end AAA player yet. Right. What you do is, A, it hurts the team, as we saw. But B, it potentially hurts that player's development.
Right.
But even beyond that, it hurts the perception of that player in that now people have watched Gilberto Celestino for parts of 2 seasons with the Twins, and I'm sure a lot of Twins fans are just convinced he stinks. Because for the most part, he hasn't been very good, or he's certainly been inconsistent.
Right.
He airmails the cutoff man.
They certainly take care. The pitchers take advantage of his weaknesses.
Right.
Like once
also, I just mean from a fan standpoint, people are watching. They go, "This guy's supposed to be good," and maybe he won't be good. I mean, there's no guarantees of that. But I just think the version you've seen of him is it's like taking something out of the oven before it's ready. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so you're going to go, well, this tastes terrible. Well, yeah, it was supposed to be in the oven for another 20 minutes. So I think the ability to send him to AAA, it's not that he's not potentially going to be in their plans for this season, but it's that he's the backup to the backup instead of being the backup. Right. And I think that is crucial for them. I also just think,
he was called up when he was 21 years old.
Right.
I mean, that's the kind of age that you call up an absolute top prospect.
Right.
He
was an okay prospect, and I think he had like 8 or 10 games at AA at that point, because they were just like, who do we have on the 40-man roster who can play center field? I actually think he projects as kind of a perfect backup outfielder. Yeah. He can play all 3 spots. He's got range. He's got a pretty good arm. If he has some level of hitting ability, I think he has kind of decent plate discipline, all that stuff. But
I kind of think he could even be better than that, to be honest with you. I'm really looking forward to seeing what he does in St. Paul for a little while.
I think the depth that we talked about, it's great to add Taylor as a 4th outfielder. I think he's a high-end 4th outfielder. And it's needed, given Buxton's injury track record. But the depth goes beyond that, because now you have Celestino as the AAA center fielder. Right. You have Gordon on the bench who can play center field. You have Gallo who can play center field. You have Kepler who, if needed, could still play center field. We're going to talk about Kepler in a minute. So, I think I have a thing for Monday about just their improved outfield defense in general, which I think has a chance to honestly be the biggest strength on the entire roster, relatively speaking.
Yeah, I think that's one of the
Taylor's a big part of that.
I think one of the underreported pieces that we haven't really talked about is how much they have improved the defense on this team over the last, I guess specifically over this offseason. That outfield looks stunning, not just the 3 starters, but the backups.
Everybody.
As well,
it's going to be very hard for them to come up with any combination.
Miranda at third base is looking like about the only, and they got probably the best defensive catcher available on the free agent market.
Vasquez.
And we already had good reports on Jeffers, except possibly throwing out runners. But the fact in terms of framing and such, it's good.
I don't think their infield is going to be amazing. I think it's going to be okay. I just think the outfield is going to be spectacular. Yeah. You have
a lot of it depends on Polanco. I'm not sure whether I like Polanco right now. Kind of profiles as sort of an average second baseman.
I don't
like he can be.
I think you're. I don't know. I don't think there's any reason to think the infield would be great, but it's not going to be bad. And if the infield is average and the outfield is the best in baseball, you're going to have a real good defense. And I just think you have 2 of probably the top 3 to 5 center fielders in the world in Buxton and Michael Taylor. Yeah. You have Kepler, who in my mind is certainly a top 3 to 5 right fielder.
Right.
You have Gallo, who's won 2 Gold Gloves in left and right, who's right now probably slotted for left, but can play right and can play center. You have Nick Gordon on the bench, who certainly as a left fielder is solid and as a center fielder is passable. As we just mentioned, you have Celestino waiting in the wings in the minors. And then, by the way, mid-season, you might have Royce Lewis in the outfield mix.
Right.
You might have Austin Martin in the outfield mix.
Right.
There's a lot of things there that I think, and
Matt Wallner isn't a bad outfielder.
that ain't going to help your
No.
defensive argument. He's a great arm, but I think you're going to see him at DH. But even Larnach, who right now is probably slated to be their designated hitter on opening day, if it stands, if they're facing a righty, is statistically a really good outfielder. In the time he's got like 900 innings over 2 years. He's huge, and so he's not a speed demon, but he's got a good, strong arm. He's massive. He moves pretty well once he gets underway. They go 6-7 deep and kind of shake it up and draw it out of a hat how you want to surround Buxton or surround Taylor in center. There really is no way, and Baldelli actually said this to me at the luncheon the other day, because I said, was outfield defense, like, did you guys sit down at the beginning of the offseason and go, we got to fix the outfield defense? And he said, no, like, it was discussed, like, are there ways to address this? But what he said was basically, well, we started kind of seeing the pieces fit here, where I'm going to not put words in his mouth, but they've not traded Kepler. Well, okay, then you have a great right fielder. They added Gallo on this 1-year upside deal. Well, he's a Gold Glover in left or right. Then you get to that point, and Baldelli kind of said, well, we got to that point a few weeks ago, and we thought, well, why don't we just lean right into this thing and just add Michael Taylor to the mix and go from very good to impossibly good? And I think look, it's not going to draw headlines. It's not going to be something where people go, I'm picking him to win the division because of the outfield defense. That would be craziness. But if you're trying to improve a fly ball pitching staff, fixing the outfield defense in a way that they go from to wow is worth potentially 10, 20, 30 runs a year. And I think there's a kind of cascading effect there where if you can get into a situation where balls hit into the gap are caught instead of being skipping up against the wall for
double
doubles,
or triple,
right? There's value in that. Like each time you catch a double, it's worth whatever runs. But I also think there's just a sort of cumulative effect there where easy innings happen. Pitchers are no longer dreading fly balls. There's like
maybe they get to face the third order.
Exactly.
Type of the order.
It kind of compounds a little bit in a way. So I think Taylor really adds to that. I think it also pretty much now look, Kepler could still be traded, but it does not sound like that's going to happen.
We'll talk about that in a second.
And so if that's the case, once you add Taylor to the mix, they've pretty much not locked in, but penciled in the half of the roster that's the position player side. So it's a 26-man roster. The maximum you can have is 13 pitchers. I would certainly expect them to have 13 pitchers. If they were allowed to have 24 pitchers, they'd have 24 pitchers. So 13 is the max now, which means they're going to have 13 position players, which means you have that starting 9 and 4 bench guys. Well, here's the thing. 8 spots are locked in, basically, in my mind. Assuming health. You have Vasquez at catcher, Kirilloff at first, Polanco.
So you got Kirilloff as okay, got it. Okay,
right,
all right.
Again, if he's healthy.
I was having 7 locked in with first base and DH being the ones I'm not totally sure about.
Polanco at second, Correa at short, Miranda at third, Gallo in left, Buxton in center, Kepler in right. I would suspect that Trevor Larnach will be your primary designated hitter, but they're going to cycle guys through the DH spot, obviously, based on injuries and matchups and all that stuff. Well, so if you include Larnach, there's your 9.
Right.
That leaves 4 bench spots. Well, Jeffers is the backup catcher, like we just discussed. Farmer is the backup infielder. Taylor is the 4th outfielder, and then Nick Gordon is the outfield, infield, whatever. Well, that's 13.
Kind of comes down to we got 12 of them figured out for sure, and then that comes down to who's the last bat.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like it almost doesn't matter what position they play.
If Kirilloff's wrist is problematic, then that changes
who are the
things.
last 2 bats?
Right.
You know?
If Matt Wallner has an amazing spring and Trevor Larnach has a poor spring or whatever, you can do some things there. I mean,
maybe Julian looks really good.
Ed Julian is I discussed him with a Twins employee at the luncheon. It was very interesting. I think you're going to see him this year. I think. At what position? Unclear, but they like him a lot as an on-base percentage guy. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's – if you look at that lineup, I'm not here to tell you that that's going to be, the 27 Yankees or something like that, or even the 2019 Twins in terms of scoring runs. But there aren't a lot of weak spots. There aren't a lot of spots where you go, oof, that guy's going to be bad. And some of the spots that are a little iffy, Gallo, for instance, if he hits 160 again, well, that is a weak spot, are easily replaceable midseason by Wallner, by Larnach, by Austin Martin, by Ed Julian, by whoever. And, if Kirilloff is not ready to go, that's a dent in their depth. They would love him to be the everyday first baseman, offensively and defensively. But also we know last year, everybody played first base, and they were mostly fine. Yeah. And going back a couple years, Sano played first base, and he was mostly fine at first base. They don't view that. Although I do think if there's a move to be made, that would be the move. Someone like Ulieski Gurriel or Luke Voigt.
It's Luke Voigt.
Something like that. But I don't get the sense that a right-handed hitting first base DH veteran, somebody who can just step into the lineup, get 400 at-bats, pop 15, 20 home runs. Yeah. I think that would be a good fit. I think they would have a use for that. But it doesn't seem like they're going after that. Now, if someone is available on a cheap deal 3 weeks from now or something. But also, as we just discussed, we named the 13 position players. Who's getting bumped from that 13 to make room for Gurriel or Voigt or fill in the blank with whichever? You could bump Larnach. You could bump whoever. Now, if Kirilloff shows up to camp and on the third day he's in the trainer's room and his wrist is problematic, well, yeah, then you're making some calls.
Then everything's maybe you're picking up a Voigt or something, or maybe you are at the very least it opens the door for Wallner or something like that. Right.
So yeah, I mean, I think that's what Taylor kind of does, and it's in tandem with what we mentioned about Kepler. We've been talking about Kepler a lot. Dan Hayes had a good report yesterday or the day before about Kepler, and the too long didn't read version of it was they've been trying to trade him. They still believe they should be able to get decent value for him.
Right.
That is not materialized, and they have basically decided we're not just going to give him away. Right. Which, we kind of laid that out at the beginning of the offseason.
At the beginning of the offseason, I thought that if they couldn't move him, they would if they couldn't trade him for something that would make the team better, they would trade him for some prospects. And maybe that still qualifies as a possibility. Right. But we just went through the roster, right? And suddenly the only area we have questions about is like hitters, left-handed hitting hitters. Well, we're kind of like, how much depth do we got Kirilloff and Larnach, and two of those guys are already taken. Once they traded Arise.
Right. I think that's the big difference, which is we entered the offseason pre-Gallo, pre-Arise trade. And it was, they got Larnach, they got Kirilloff, they got Wallner. They could probably afford to trade Kepler. Then they signed Gallo, who is a left-handed hitting corner outfielder / first baseman, and we go, they're going to trade Kepler, obviously. But instead, they lessened that left-handed bat logjam, corner bat, right field, left field, first base DH logjam, of which there is one, by trading Arise. Right. And I'm not saying that's a one-for-one, like that opens a spot for Kepler or anything, but it removes a left-handed bat from the mix. And he was going to play first base DH.
Suddenly you're a little bit more worried about the depth, especially given that you still don't know about Kirilloff's wrist.
I personally wouldn't be worried about it, but I think there's less kind of overflow. Right. Where you go, we got to move this guy. Yeah. And what they made clear, and we talked about this for months now, at the beginning of the offseason was we're not just looking to salary dump Max Kepler. He's owed $8.5 million this year, a $10 million option with a $1 million buyout for next year. They could, let's be very clear, today, if they just decided we need that $8.5 million or we don't want Max Kepler, they could 100% trade him for some C-level prospect or some random reliever or whatever. That's not.
Or if somebody became available that they needed to trade for and add some additional payroll, that's an easy way to make some room. Right.
But they're holding out, rightly or wrongly, for what they perceive to be decent value for him. I do think they would trade him for a good reliever, but not necessarily 1 year of a good reliever. I don't mean like a Duran type. I mean like a Michael Fulmer type. Right. Yeah. But I think if they could get a reliever who's got a couple of years of team control, even a 6th, 7th inning type of guy, I think they would do something like that. I think if you could get a good prospect.
Do you think they'd still do something like that?
Yes. I think that's kind of what they're holding out for. Do you know what I mean? Like that's why Kepler is still on the roster. There's also the possibility that he does benefit from the shift, that he has a good first half, in which case if Wallner's down at AAA crushing it, or Larnach's looking healthy and Kirilloff's looking healthy, and all of a sudden Austin Martin's hitting 300 at AAA or whatever, Royce Lewis is about to, well, then you can potentially execute that sort of trade with Kepler, who would then have another year of team control that teams might value. So
I can see where they would make that deal, and then also go out and get a Voit or something like that, where they try to backfill one of the spots, so they're not counting on Larnach and Kirilloff at first, and Larnach in left field, and Wallner at DH.
I agree.
So.
I'm not high on Max Kepler. I probably would have traded him. Possibly in previous years, I would have traded him. But I do get the logic of it. I don't think there's like a pressing need to trade him. The money isn't really needed. Right. I mean, unless you just think they desperately need to sign, Michael Fulmer or something like that, or Luke Voit or Gurriel or whatever it is. I would argue that for the $5 million that might take, they should just do that anyway. But that's a whole other issue. So that's where they're kind of at. I mean, I think the only person who really doesn't have right now, if they keep Kepler and they've added Taylor and everybody's healthy-ish, which means Kirilloff and Larnach, the only guy who really doesn't have kind of a clear marching orders is Gordon in terms of a role. Yeah. And I include Wallner in that. Wallner right now would be headed to AAA, and I think you can make the argument that I'd be just fine put him in the majors on opening day. Sure. But he only played like a month at AAA last year. Right. So to send him for AAA for a couple months.
I'd rather he's getting every day at bats.
Right,
exactly. He's not going to get every day bats.
Everyone else, if healthy, Kirilloff's going to play a ton at first base and DH and some probably left field. If healthy, Larnach's going to play a ton of DH and corner outfield. We just went over Kepler and Taylor and Buxton and Gallo in the outfield. There's plenty of at-bats to go around there, in my opinion. Taylor's a right-handed bat, while not a Garlic type, but he is a right-handed bat who can kind of platoon and mix and match there. You're going to see him next to Buxton at times, which is going to be – I mean, if you can put out Taylor in left, Buxton in center, and either Gallo or Kepler in right, it's impossible to get a better defense in an outfield than that. Right. Like, unless you're going to resurrect, a 22-year-old Andrew Jones with like a 25-year-old Willie Mays or something. Like, it's impossible to do that. And so I think if you're only kind of where do we find at bats is Nick Gordon, which, by the way, was the case last year as well. He did not have an established role. And like you said, he ended up getting –
He had 400 at bats, yeah.
And so I do think, given his positional flexibility and given his track record and all that, to have him be the one kind of counterpunch move as opposed to a plan is perfectly fine with me.
I mean, he's got the flexibility and he's got the defensive flexibility to play almost everywhere.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's certainly infield or outfield he can play.
Yeah.
And
what I'm curious about is if he are they going to have him play a little third base? I think that would open up something. Because if Kirilloff is hurt, you're going to see Gallo at first base a lot. You're also going to see some Miranda at first base, in which case third base is open. You'd probably see Farmer then at third base, but I think it would be good to have a left-handed bat at third base. But they really haven't played Gordon at third base. But my point is always
the arm for third base.
But if you play shortstop in the majors, you can certainly play third base in the majors.
Yeah, but they didn't play shortstop in the majors.
Well, he's played 20 games at shortstop. I mean, I don't think Jose Miranda has a better arm than Gordon necessarily.
Here's the best part about Gordon as sort of the 13th man. He's left-handed.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can put him
but that only helps
in a fair amount of time. Huh?
That only helps really in the infield because everybody's left-handed in the outfield. But that's where they're at for position player side of things. Before we get to a bunch of other news and notes here, let's talk about our last couple of sponsors. One of them is BetterHelp, which is a long-ish time sponsor. The deal with BetterHelp is it's therapy, and the beauty of it is instead of having to call around and go interview people and do stuff over the phone or in person or whatever, they'll set it up however you want to set it up.
And all the obstacles.
Yes, what I mean by that is, if you say to yourself, I don't want to see somebody in person, but I could do a video chat.
Right.
Perfect.
That's right.
If you say, I don't even want to be on camera. I haven't showered today. I'm feeling self-conscious. You want to just talk to somebody on the phone. They'll set that up. And if you say, like I have many days in my life, I don't even want to talk on the phone. You can just do a live chat with them. They will tailor it to your needs. It's removing kind of the barrier for entry to therapy, which I think is so valuable. As someone who has woken up some days and said, I'd love to talk to somebody about this, and then thought, it's going to take hours to set this up, and I'll have to drive over here and see somebody.
How do I even go about doing it?
Right.
Who do I talk to?
And then it stops you from doing it.
It's
BetterHelp removes
so
all that.
Convenient.
It's super convenient. Right. It's real therapy from real licensed therapists that can actually help you with whatever it is, small or big, stuff that you need.
Also, a little bit more affordable.
It's more affordable too. And if you want to give it a try, you can go to betterhelp.com/Gleeman. You get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP, betterhelp.com/Gleeman. And then our last sponsor for today is Native Deodorant. You can also solve some of your life's problems by smelling better or less bad by Native Deodorant. That's what John has done. People used to hate John. Now people like John, mostly because he smells like vanilla and coconut instead of BO.
Or some of the latest vanilla, some Valentine's Day flavors.
Yeah. That's your own business, John. I don't want to get into that.
That's great. Candy flavors like, let's see, I think you got strawberry taffy.
Yeah.
I got something cinnamony.
I think I got a gummy bear one or something too. But the way Native Deodorant works is they send it right to you. It works well, smells good, using ingredients that you will actually recognize when you look at it and you say, I don't even know what this is. So you're putting it on your body. It doesn't have like aluminum and all that stuff on it. Right. And the packaging, they can go non-plastic packaging, which is great.
Yes. I like that cardboard packaging better than I like the plastic.
You can pick and choose
it works better.
The different scents that you want or the different types that you want. And if you go to Native DEO, like deodorant, DEO, nativedeo.com/Gleeman, use the promo code Gleeman when you check out. You get a 20% off your first order. That's nativedeo.com/Gleeman. Promo code Gleeman at checkout gets you 20% off your first order. Okay, so let's move. I got a bunch of just random stuff
let's roll.
To talk about here. So just wanted to, the one, just to reiterate with Taylor, I've been of the opinion that they are short of one right-handed hitting outfield bat. They have Kyle Garlick now off the 40-man roster, but still in the organization at AAA. He could suffice. I personally would have tried to find kind of a rich man's Kyle Garlick this offseason. Right. McCutchen, Pollock, Mancini, Duvall, that type of thing.
And there's evidence that they did try to do that. They certainly were in on McCutchen.
But they didn't do that. And so instead they took an interesting tact, which is, what if we kind of flip it on its head? We're looking for a big-ish bat who can passably play left and right field. What if instead we find a elite center fielder who can play left and right field and really prop up the defense? And he's a right-handed hitter, Michael Taylor, but his career, I think he's got 725 OPS against lefties. That's still going to be a bottom of the order guy, but it's good enough that with a tough lefty on the mound on a given day, you can take Larnach or Kepler or Gallo or Kirilloff, whoever, out of the lineup, give them a day off so you don't have as many lefties in the lineup, which was a huge problem for the last year. You want to avoid lefty-on-lefty matchups when you're building lineups unless you have a true elite left-handed hitter, and even then, they need some days off against really good. Taylor is certainly capable enough as a right-handed hitter to hit you 260 with a little bit of pop. As a 7, 8, 9 hitter, he will be an upgrade over Kepler against lefties, over Gallo against lefties. And so I think he fits that way, and if the overall value package – he's less of a hitter.
And he provides really good defense out there as well.
That's the thing, right? So you're getting a little boost offensively against lefties, not nearly what you would from Garlick or from McCutchen or Pollock, but he's also extraordinarily great in left to right field and can fill a void as the backup center fielder, so you're checking multiple boxes. So it's not it's a little bit of a creative solution to the same problem, but I think the end result will be the same. It just doesn't. It's not quite as straightforward of a fit of a kind of platoon outfielder.
It also provides you the opportunity versus lefties to put Buxton at DH. Right, because we've got the both corners are left-handed hitters, but looks like our first baseman and our DH might also be left-handed hitters, right? So you can throw Taylor in center field, and then whoever you're gonna throw Larnach out in left field for a day, and now Buxton gets to be the DH, something like that.
I also think you're going to see Farmer some in left field.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I think you're going to see Jeffers at times at DH against lefties, where they can start Vasquez at catcher and or vice versa.
That's a good point, too.
So, there's going to be some mixing and matching there. Okay, so a few other notes here. Speaking of Jeffers, I was in the lunch line, like I said, at the media luncheon, and they were serving tater tot hot dish, and I'm scooping it onto my plate.
Of course.
Why not?
I hope you're scooping a lot.
Yeah, decent amount by my standards, yeah. And next to me in line is Pablo Lopez and Ryan Jeffers.
Okay.
And I could tell Pablo Lopez is eyeing it up like, what the fuck is that? But he's not. I barely met him. But Jeffers goes, what's the deal with Minnesotans and tater tot hot dish? Just to no one in particular.
Yeah,
so I turned to him and I was like, all right, I'm going to try to explain it. And so I'm talking and I'm saying, well, it's a comfort food and blah, blah, blah. And then I say to him, I can tell he's taking in what I'm saying. Yeah. And Lopez is like listening to what I'm saying. And I'm like 30 seconds into it and I'm holding up the line. And I finally just stop and I say to him, you know what? We got a lot of weird shit here. And he said, yeah. And he almost like nudged Lopez like, you're going to learn. They do have a lot of weird shit here. So I thought that was a good. I tried.
None of the weird shit is tater tot hot dish, though. That's
it's not at the top of the list, but yeah. Anyway, the other thing, Joe Mauer, they announced is going into the Twins Hall of Fame.
Yep.
Which everybody knew, worst kept secret of all time. It'll be August 5th, which is a Saturday night home game at Target Field against the Arizona Diamondbacks.
Cool.
He'll be there for that. He's the only Hall of Fame inductee this year for the Twins. I don't know.
We'll see how long the pregame thing goes.
Yeah, I don't predict he'll be a real long speech.
No, I don't think so.
Although I wouldn't have predicted Morneau was going to be a long speech, and he went approximately 4 hours to the point that people make fun of him constantly for that. Yeah. Let's see a few other notes from some of the media availability around Twins Fest. I asked about the 6-man rotation possibility, and a couple other people asked about that too. And I would say that Falvey and Baldelli, but Falvey, he didn't rule it out. He didn't say, like, we'll never use a 6-man rotation. But reading between the lines, the sense I got was that they are planning to use a 5-man rotation. And if somehow they get to opening day
with 6
healthy, Sonny Gray, Maeda, Malley, Lopez, Joe Ryan, and Bailey Ober. Those are their 6 starters. They're kind of veteran-ish starters. If somehow all those guys, which includes Maeda coming back from Tommy John surgery, Malley coming back from shoulder problems last year, Bailey Ober coming back from hamstring problems last year, and on and on and on. If somehow it's the end of March and all those guys have made 5 spring starts and they're all feeling great, is a 6-man rotation possible for a few weeks or whatever? Maybe. I still don't think it's likely, but that's possible. However, the point is, realistically, the odds of those particular 6 guys, let alone really any 6 starters, getting healthy and making it to that point are pretty slim. I would almost argue they are more likely to end camp with 4 of those guys healthy than they are with 6 of those guys healthy. I think 5 is probably the most likely number, which means someone's not right.
I mean, the 6-man rotation question strikes me as the same sort of thing as the what are we going to do when so-and-so comes off the injured list 2 weeks from now question.
Odds
the answer is,
by that point,
we'll answer the question when we have to actually ask the question.
Right. And it's also it's a good problem to have, or a good question to have to answer.
Sure.
I mean, you would certainly prefer that over whatever. That's a new one. The person who walked in and interrupted, then said, "Are you doing a podcast?" "Yes." "Can I talk to you?" "I want to do a podcast." That's a new one. It's a new one. I always say,
I've got a card.
John's like, yeah, but
She's a lawyer.
I wouldn't advise it. Okay, a few other things. Gallo, like I mentioned, I think is clearly the backup first baseman. Okay. I think if Kirilloff begins the year on the injured list, Gallo will be the opening day first baseman, in which case that whole outfield scenario shifts a little bit.
Maybe Larnach in the left.
Probably, who knows at DH. I don't get the sense that they're actively trying to sign a reliever, whether it's Fulmer, Andrew Chafin, fill in the blank with whoever you like. That doesn't mean, again, similar to the first base thing we just discussed with Voit and Gurriel or whoever, 3-4 weeks from now, if there's an injury or there's just a couple of guys sitting on the market who are willing to take minor league deals.
Or they take a look at the arms they've got in the relief pitch.
I don't think it's like impossible that they bring someone in. I don't expect, whether it's Fulmer or whoever else, that they're kind of actively looking. I think they feel, rightly or wrongly, and I certainly would lean towards adding one more quality reliever, but they don't feel that way. At least that's my sense. There was a lot of talk about...
Which has always been one of their things. Like they seem to feel like they can develop relief pitchers. Yeah.
There was a lot of talk about Miranda being in much better shape. He's been working out a lot.
Right.
The idea is you're going to be a third baseman now, get into better shape. I also think he went through the grind of a full-ish season in the majors, and by the end of it was on fumes physically and kind of felt. And so
that would explain the September and August. Yeah.
And Correa, who's become his mentor and taken him under his wings, was at Twins Fest talking up how great he looked. Right. And he said his quote that everybody liked was, he said to the reporters at Twins Fest, "Have you seen that body? Sexy." And I thought, yeah, okay.
I mean, the truth is that Miranda is sort of a
sexy.
Yeah, that's right. He is sort of a pivot point on this team in a lot of ways.
I agree.
They need his right-handed power bat, and frankly, they need a decent bat at third base. We just talked about that's the one position we're like, okay, well, if that doesn't work out, we're either going to see a lot of Kyle Farmer or a lot of Nick Gordon or some combination of them.
Somebody's going to get rushed to the majors,
or somebody's going to get rushed to the majors, like
Brooks Lee, Austin Martin.
Can Julian play third base?
Yeah, he played third base in college. I don't think he's going to be great at third base. Julian's played everywhere, basically.
Yeah.
He's been at second mostly recently. But for that matter, if Royce Lewis is healthy in June or July, third base is not an unnatural spot for a former shortstop.
Absolutely.
Basically.
Right.
So,
absolutely right.
Let's see, a couple other things. Kenta Maeda told reporters at Twins Fest he's a full go. He is 100% healthy. Right. That was part of their hope by not bringing him back as a reliever in September, that he could have a full normal offseason with no setbacks and basically show up to spring training.
He almost gets the 18-month Tommy John recovery period, despite the fact that he was kind of on a 12-month Tommy John recovery period.
That doesn't guarantee anything, but they can hopefully treat him as a normal starter as opposed to, this guy's coming back. And then Kirilloff talked to Dan, I didn't talk to me, but talked to Dan Hayes and said, somewhat concerningly, although he didn't seem concerned by it, but that he's been swinging, I think he said 50 to 60 swings a day recently during the offseason to kind of ramp up all the time he missed with the twice surgically repaired right wrist, and told Dan he still has some pain and discomfort, but that it's different than it was.
Okay.
And that they told him basically...
That's scar tissue?
No, they told him we shaved part of your bone down.
Okay, right.
It's still... Setting aside the actual injury, if we had just gone in and done that to a healthy wrist, there'd be some recovery time. Now, obviously, his track record with this and the fact that he had the surgery and then had pain and couldn't play through it and had to have a second surgery is worrisome. Right. And I do think there's a very real possibility that even without a huge setback, he just participates in spring training and they just decide... He needs another 3 weeks. He needs another month, whatever it is. In which case, there's going to be someone might have to be added to the roster. There's going to be some shuffling.
Maybe he goes to St. Paul. Maybe he goes to extended spring training.
Now, you mentioned Miranda as a pivot point. I think Kirilloff is probably the biggest, to me, pivot point.
That's a pivot point.
Because a healthy Alex Kirilloff, the guy we saw briefly, but we saw the last couple of years and the year before that when they called him up after... this is
both of those guys could
middle of the order.
Yeah, those guys could be on 3, 4, 5 hitters.
Yeah, for 10 years or whatever. Right. Or if he's got wrist problems for a third straight year, that might be it. You know what I mean? That's such a wide spectrum of results, and it's so impossible to sit here on Feb whatever and say which one is more likely. Certainly, they're optimistic. I don't mean to paint it as pessimism.
It feels to me like you got more backup plans for Kirilloff than you do for Miranda, though, or at least better backup plans.
That's always going to be the case. Miranda is a backup plan for Kirilloff.
Right,
in
that's
some ways.
a fair point.
But first base is always just going to be.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Let's see, a few other.
Yeah, they could move Miranda to first, and
look, I think Edward Julian at first base in the second half could very much work. I think Miranda at first base. Either he doesn't look great at third base, in which they just say throw him back at first or DH. Yeah. I asked about Larnach and Wallner getting reps at first base and was told that's not really in the plans right now. But Gallo will absolutely. I think Gallo's going to play a lot of first base. Farmer can play first base. I'm trying to think who else. I don't know. A couple other things. Let's finish with the TV discussion, I guess. We don't have some great insight into this. I've been reading the same articles everyone else has. We got a chance to talk to Dave St. Peter a little bit about it. I've talked off record with a few Twins officials about it, months ago, just kind of the overall situation. But basically the newest thing with Sinclair, which owns Bally Sports, through a subsidiary called Diamond Sports Group or something like that. It's a disaster. It's probably I read Bloomberg called it the biggest sports media loss or failure or whatever ever. They bought 20-something stations,
right?
Local
From Fox,
regional sports networks,
because
from
Fox needed to sell them.
Right, it was deemed a monopoly once Fox.
Right, that's right.
They bought like 20-something, including what was Fox Sports North became Bally Sports North. Right. So think of that. It has Twins and Wild and Wolves and some Gopher stuff and whatever. There's one of those in every market basically, or most markets. And they bought 25 of them, something like that, including the Minnesota one. And for billions of dollars, by the way, like tens of billions of dollars.
They decided what they were going to do. If they had this different market plan, they were instead of, licensing stuff out to streaming providers, right? Basically, you are able to watch it on
TV,
cable because they have a license with Comcast. Right. Comcast agrees to show them, and they agree to sell.
Most places are.
They've come to an agreement on how much Comcast is going to charge their people for them, right?
Most places in the year 2022, 2023 are wanting to be on Hulu TV, YouTube TV, Google. They want to be available to cord cutters, streamers, all that.
Sinclair said they didn't want to do that.
They went the opposite.
And they let all of those contracts expire. And the reason they did that is because they were going to go the Netflix direction, right? They were going to become their own subscription service where you go and you get, you get the stuff directly from them as opposed to through these other various online providers. And it costs $20 a month or something like that. I can't remember exactly what they
Except the infrastructure for that was not in place. Turns out they don't know what the hell they're doing. Right. So once the product they did put out was horrendous in my opinion.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm a user.
Okay.
They also just completely misjudged the market for that right now. They also, by the way, tried to play hardball with YouTube TV and some of these places in terms of what they were going to charge them to be on their service. And all these services say, you need us more than we need you. Right. What are you doing?
Right. And they played hardball because they thought they would just get it directly.
But they also played hardball with like Dish and some of the other places. They just completely mismanaged this, I would say, on every possible level. And to be clear, this is not anyone in Minnesota.
Right.
I know, like, Dave St. Peter gets asked about this constantly. People are upset. They're upset, too.
Yeah.
They were sort of sold to this thing. The Twins themselves
already had a contract with this provider.
They have no control over this, really. So what's happened recently that changed it, we'll keep this short, but like Bloomberg came out with an article and there's been some other reports. The Diamond Sports whatever, which is kind of the umbrella subsidiary that has under it all these regional sports networks.
Because Sinclair doesn't just have the regional sports networks. They also have local networks throughout the United States, right?
Is going bankrupt, almost certainly. Now, that doesn't mean Sinclair's going bankrupt because that's how corporations work. They're protected.
That's how they shield themselves.
But what's going to happen is they're going bankrupt, which means the people who have loaned them money, the people to whom they owe money, potentially have the ability to convert that debt into equity. In other words, they can say, you owe us $10 billion. You have no money to pay us. We want 80% of the company or 100% of the company for that. If that happens, it can go one way because then you've basically turned this entire regional sports system over to a bunch of hedge fund guys or whatever, which
or banks,
probably
or
not the greatest news. Or it could just blow up and sort of dissolve, in which case it becomes the Wild West for these teams. In the Twins situation, they only have one more year under contract to Bally Sports or to Sinclair Media. Right. And the way I would describe their situation is, imagine you're a senior in high school and you were at the worst school of all time.
Okay.
And you go out into the hallway and there's just, dumpster fires going and there are no books and the teachers have all quit and you go, I got to get out of this school. And then someone tells you, oh, actually, this school is just going to get torn down. And you go, when's that going to happen? And they go, next year probably. And you go, well, I'm a senior anyway, so what's the difference?
Right.
That's where the Twins are.
Right.
The Twins
accept that.
We're going to get out of this thing no matter what. They were going to graduate out of this horrendous school. And I can tell you, they were not looking to re-up with Bally because they're not happy with the
But it's not clear what their other options are.
That's the problem.
Right.
So you graduate out of this crappy high school and then you go, I'm looking to go to college now. And then you go, where? And you go, well, there aren't any colleges all of a sudden. I'm going to stop with this terrible analogy. But basically, if you're now there are some markets where there are alternatives. There are some markets that have a CSN, Comcast Sport.
Right.
There's some like Root Sports I know, and there's some sort of localized options here.
I would think that Comcast would be taking a look at this and going.
But for the Twins, there are no established options television-wise for them to sort of now. And keep in mind, this is 162 games, plus it's Wolves and Wild. I mean, this is hundreds of hours of programming or days of programming. There isn't another alternative. Now, someone could start that. The Twins tried to do that 20 years ago. Right. Someone could start that up. But I think the fear is...
The problem with that is that if you try to start something like that, you still have to get the local cable provider to add you to their channels, right? Which is what they ran into when they tried to do Victory Sports back in, 2000.
It's a mess, and I think while getting away from Bally and Sinclair is probably a good thing long term, I don't know that there's an immediate solution to that is going to be better even or less bad even. But what I will say is this, because this is the thing that Twins fans want to know about the most. If this thing goes bankrupt, if it gets sold, if it whatever, I'm pretty confident saying, the Twins seem pretty confident saying, their games this season, in the season that starts, 6 weeks from now, whatever it is, probably will not be affected. This whole process is going to take enough time to play out, and there's enough protections in place and all that stuff that it's not like a month from now, the hammer is going to drop and all of a sudden 20 different teams have no television home. The idea seems to be the 2023 season will be unaffected, at which point maybe the 2024 season is very much affected. Right. But the Twins are done with them anyway. So the Twins were going to be in a position where they needed to find a new home or to renegotiate with Bally and return, which I thought was unlikely, regardless. And so I think the hope, if you're a Twins fan, is it should be quote unquote business as usual, which, by the way, wasn't great to begin with. A lot of people can't watch them anyway. But that is, I think, the current sense of where the Bally Sports North is. The upcoming season should not be affected.
Yeah, the question
there are massive questions about what happens after that.
Yeah, it might not be on cable in 2024.
And just the industry as a whole, I really believe that the NBA, NHL, MLB are going to take over distribution of their own product. Yeah. I think that's where this is headed.
It's funny that they're kind of being pushed into it because that's definitely something they've been interested in, but it was too profitable to not do that.
Right.
It was too profitable to wait and let the two regional sport network channels in each market play off against each other.
Correct. And here's ultimately...
I'd be real interested to see how Comcast, if Comcast considers adding a sports network, in part because if they don't, and the Twins decide we're not signing with anybody.
Right.
How many people drop cable completely? Right?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I have DirecTV.
Right.
And the only kind of live programming that I watch on TV via DirecTV versus streaming on whatever platform is live sports.
Right.
I mean, truly.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah.
I think, but the other factor here, and then we'll shut up, is the Twins have 1 year left on their deal. There are teams that have a 20-year deal. Some teams have a 20-year billion-dollar deal. I mean, they're making just incredible money. But it's meaningless because if there is no television as we know it 5 years from now, or there is no system in place to have regional sports networks on cable or DirecTV, as we've been discussing, what does it matter if you're the Arizona Diamondbacks and you have a deal for 20 years and $1 billion to distribute your games over the air television or cable television? If there is no such distribution method, that contract is just going to disappear or be litigated, obviously. Yep. And so that's, I think, where the Twins are. It's a massive question going forward, but I think for this season, it's going to be relatively uninterrupted.
Interestingly enough, I think in some ways it could make the Twins a more competitive team in the future because I think a lot of these other teams are getting a much bigger television contract for the last several years. If it all goes to hell, Twins are going to be affected, but everybody's going to be affected.
Yeah,
and the Twins might be affected less than others. And if it ends up going with Major League Baseball is providing this distribution service overall. Well, I mean that's similar to NFL football, right?
You're assuming Major League Baseball will take that approach.
That's true. Yeah, as opposed to individual teams. Right?
NFL slices that pie up 32 equal ways.
Right, exactly.
If MLB does that, that would be great news for the Twins and terrible news for the Dodgers and the Yankees.
But
MLB generally has not sliced up pies 30 ways.
All right, we've got to go. I've got to run to a meeting. We've got a free episode again coming up next Friday. I think in the middle of this week, we're probably doing a Patreon mailbag episode, definitely. Right? And we want to thank our sponsors, which are Soda Stick and 7th Avenue and Native Deodorant and BetterHelp.
Join the Patreon, Patreon, patreon.com.
It's okay to get excited and join the Patreon. Go.
Or even if you're mad, you can get mad and still listen.
It's true, too.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Gleeman.